A good Tuesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. We were talking about it yesterday, and it is dreary December, and we definitely saw that in full force as you made your way outside earlier this morning. Let's take a look at some of our 24-hour rainfall totals, because these are some of the most substantial totals that we have seen over the last 3 months. It's been a while since we've seen many areas even report about an inch of rain over a 24-hour period, but breaking it down piece by piece after we take this big picture view. So we see a whole lot of blue, but some scattered green areas. Your scale up here, the blue color is going to be around 1/4 of an inch of rain, but the darker blue shade that you have, that's going to be closer to an inch of rain. And then once you get above an inch of rain, that's going to translate into the green color. And then above 2 inches is going to be the yellow colors. We don't see any yellow in central Georgia. We see a couple patches of those back over into southeastern Alabama. But let's go into our northernmost counties, because these areas didn't luck out with as much rain as, say, areas farther down to the south. Here's a look at 1/2 inch of rain up in Monticello, around 3/4 of an inch in Eatonton, around an inch of rain in Milledgeville, and then you'll start to see some patchy areas of that green. They're going to correlate to just over an inch of rain, nearly an inch and a half over in western Washington County, but in downtown Sandersville, only about 0.8 of an inch. Down in Wilkinson County, 1.3 inches, 0.8 inches of rain in Gray, just south of downtown Macon. So this is going to be closer to the areas around Eisenhower Parkway, getting over to Pionono, about 1.4 inches of rain. Just to the west of Bolingbroke, 1.1, 1.2 inches of rain in northern Crawford County, and then over to Upson County, just over 1/2 inch of rain. This picture view is going to be where our most substantial totals are found. Many areas that have some totals over the 1 inch mark, even 1 inch of rain in Warner Robins. And if you live in southeastern Houston County, say near the Elko and Henderson areas, you got nearly 2 inches of rain, 1.7 inches right there as you transition over into the Four Corners area of Wilkinson, Twiggs, Bleckley, and Lawrence counties. That's where we start to see the most widespread green. This train of heavy showers did move over the southern vicinity of Twiggs County, and then as you get over into western Lawrence County, 1.5 inches of rain, and then nearly 1.5 inches of rain in the downtown Dublin corridor. And now our southern counties, you definitely see your fair share of some green spotty areas, but it's not widespread. It's just some localized areas that got up to maybe about 1.25 inches or maybe even close to 1.5 inches of rain. In fact, the highest total that I see can be found just around Pineview on the Pulaski and Wilcox County lines, 1.4 inches, and then 1.4 inches of rain also over in Byronville. This obviously doesn't seem like enough to really get us out of those drought conditions that have settled in, but all in all, these are pretty substantial totals, and this is just the first of 2 widespread rainmakers that we do have in store for this week. But we're off to a hot start, or a wet start rather, I should say, for the month of December. 0.24 inches of rain recorded as of yesterday. So I imagine we're going to have some more totals that allow for that number to go up for the first 2 days of December. So far we stand at 0.24 inches, nearly 1/4 of an inch of rain. On average in December, we typically see just over 4 inches of rain at 4.11 inches. And the record was actually set not too long ago, exactly a decade ago, back in 2015. We saw over 1 foot of rain. So 12.62 inches of rain is where the record stands. Do I anticipate we'll have that much rain in December? Not necessarily, but a lot of our outlooks, at least monthly outlooks, have indicated that December is going to be a pretty wet month. So I imagine this average of 4.11 is probably going to go up maybe about 1/100th or 2 of an inch if we are to get some totals that say go above that threshold. So we'll be on the lookout for that, and it's something we desperately need. I did allude to those drought conditions just a second ago, and if you missed it yesterday or late last week, this is the latest update of your drought monitor, taking into account all the rainfall we got through last Tuesday. So we will get all the rainfall accounted for from the overnight hours last night and the early morning hours today into the drought monitor release that we get on Thursday this week. So we take all the data as of every Tuesday, and then the drought monitor gets released around 9 a.m. each and every Thursday. We saw the expansion of a severe drought, this orange shade, across most areas of central Georgia now. Macon, Warner Robins, Perry, Dublin, Wrightsville, down to Eastman, Unadilla, Butler, Thomaston. All of those locations find themselves under a severe drought, which is a step above, say, a moderate drought, which exists for areas like Forsyth up to Gray, Milledgeville, Sparta, Eatonton, Lake Sinclair, Lake Oconee, and then down around Lake Blackshear in southern Chris County. That's where we actually see portions of an extreme drought trying to stretch into central Georgia. And we did just take a look at those rainfall totals. A whole lot of rain fell to the south and the southwest of us. Hopefully that's going to provide some improvement on the update with the drought monitor that we get on Thursday. So that's something we will be eagerly awaiting. So it was a dreary start to today, and it's still pretty messy out there. We'll take a live look at the sky cams in just a moment, but we are clearing out briefly as we go into the second half of today and into Wednesday. Most of Wednesday, in fact, looks almost entirely dry, but we do have a bit of an asterisk around that term mostly dry. We'll talk about that too. And more rain will be present later this week, specifically as we head into Friday. But then there are some question marks about how long that rain hangs around in the picture as we go into the rest of the weekend. So taking a walk around the quad, it still looks like a very messy atmosphere. We still have plenty of water that's lingering at the surface, and mainly because the skies continue to be mostly cloudy, so we haven't had some sunshine to lead to the evaporation of all that water on the ground. But along with that, take a look at downtown Macon. It is foggy. A little bit later than it should be. Typically we have that morning fog in the picture. It starts to dissipate around this time, around 10 to 11 a.m. Well, that's not the case because we just had our rainfall during the last couple of hours over downtown Macon. So of course that is resulting in some sufficient moisture at the surface that can create some low-level cloud cover and some cloud formation. So we barely have an image of the downtown Macon skyline. Let's go ahead and talk about your visibility map because it's something that is worth noting for the rest of today. It says the visibility in Macon is 10 miles far and wide, but I do imagine that we have at least some thin fog stretching into the area from that current image. This graphic just hasn't necessarily updated as of yet. It does look like the densest fog present around Lake Sinclair, just north of Milledgeville, right on the county lines of Baldwin, Putnam, and Hancock counties. And we also see some patchy fog over here to the west, engulfing Taylor County, and just to the west of Butler. That's where some of the darker gray shaded areas are going to be. Otherwise, visibility is looking pretty good, other than the fact that, yes, you're not getting any peaks of sunshine so far, but your temperatures early this morning, they were scattered about the 40s. At the lowest, we saw some 42s. At the warmest, we were seeing some 47s and some 48s. What we have seen maybe a steady increase in most of our areas here in central Georgia. 50 degrees in Macon, 52 degrees in Warner Robins, 53. That is the warmest number that we have within the trio of Unadilla, Cordele, and Americus. Most areas are still hanging out in the mid to upper 40s, so kind of a battleground between green and light blue shades on your temperature map, indicating that it is still a pretty chilly atmosphere. And that's the case all across the southeast. We can get a good image of our southeastern corner of the country, where we do see kind of a rainbow of colors. We have the dark blue just to the north of us, and then we start to see that transition into light blue, eventually that green color, and eventually down to some yellows and oranges as you go down into Florida. So pretty cold over to the west, to the north of us, to the northwest of us, but as you go southeast, that's where we start to see holding on to some humidity and some warmer numbers, say down in areas like Jacksonville and Orlando, sitting at 72 and 74 degrees respectively. But many areas of the eastern United States are engulfed in cloud cover and in rain. And along with that, you have blue colors translating to where a lot of that rain is. So it's a very cold rain like we had present earlier this morning. But very thankfully, our numbers aren't, say, 23 in St. Louis, 23 in Kansas City. Now, a lot of you may be saying, Alex, I wish our temperatures are like that because all that rain this morning would have transitioned into snow if our temperatures were that cold. Let's not go talking about the S word as of right now. Obviously, we are just getting into the month of December. We have the whole season of winter left. In fact, we haven't even crossed into the season of winter, although it is the start of meteorological winter, which got started as of yesterday on December 1st. But pretty abnormal to see this. Temperatures in Houston, Texas, 46 degrees, are actually cooler for a change than what our temperatures are here in the Macon area. We also do see all of that deep dark blue color kind of stretching down into the deep south United States. But enough about what the temperature feels like elsewhere. Let's go ahead and talk about your forecast here back at home. Your dew point temperatures, upper 40s, some areas around the 50-degree mark, maybe some faint areas of light green trying to build in. Overall, we do have a little bit of moisture in the atmosphere, but it's not too much and it's not very substantial whatsoever. Your more humid areas are down to the south in southern Georgia and as you get into northern Florida, where we can start to see some peaks of that dark green color, the super swampy areas. So it continues to be a very dry atmosphere here in the southeast United States, with the exception of Florida, of course, and your winds. They have subsided a bit, but we are going to see a pretty widespread breeze build in as we go into this afternoon, which we'll talk about on your future view winds and wind gust graphic. So 45 degrees for a low temperature yesterday, 5 degrees above average of 40 this time of year as we started off your Monday morning, but 54 degrees. We only saw a temperature increase of 9 degrees, giving you an idea of how a very cloudy atmosphere and some dense cloud cover can influence your forecast during this time of year. So it was a chilly afternoon, 11 degrees below average of 65 degrees this time of year, and your record high temperature, thankfully not 1998. If we were flirting with the 80s as we go into the month of December, and obviously that would be abnormally warm. Record low temperature, also very thankful we didn't have that present. 18 degrees is just absolutely blistering cold. I can't attest to it. When I was up in Virginia for Thanksgiving, that was the morning low temperature for one morning I was up there, and it did not feel too good whatsoever. So 0.24 inches of rain yesterday, nearly a quarter of an inch. Your year departure of rain actually saw a bit of an increase. It was down at negative, I believe, 0.62 inches yesterday. Well, it's gone back up to the half-inch mark. It's kind of funny how this year departure settles in perfectly with those numbers with a 0 at the end of them. But all in all, we still need a little bit more rain, and we have some more rain to take into account as of this morning, which I imagine will get us close back to flat average where we should be at this point in 2025. And then I mentioned another widespread rainmaker is going to be ahead as we go into the end of the work week. Sunrise 7:19 and sunset at 5:28 p.m. yesterday. I did mention that yesterday was going to be the earliest sunset that we see. And this graphic doesn't always line up with what the actual sunrise and sunset times are. Typically, there's about a minute of disagreement, but I do believe the sunset yesterday was probably around 5:27, 5:28. All in all, you're not really noticing the difference. The main thing and the main takeaway from that is the sun is setting before 5:30. So obviously it is getting dark very, very early, and it will continue to do so until we get sometime into January. And maybe we start to see those hours of daylight get a little bit back to normal. But this time of the year, at the beginning of winter or just before winter, is going to be the time frame that we do see the shortest hours of daylight each and every day during the calendar year. So it was a messy morning, but I've had to do some editing to this graphic. Partly cloudy after the rain gets out of the picture, and that's what you see. Whew, thought I felt a sneeze coming on there, excuse me. Northwest winds 5 to 15 miles per hour, maybe even a gust close to 25 miles per hour, but I did change this icon right here to a partly cloudy and got rid of the rain icon. And some areas, they do have the potential to flirt with average today. 62 was my forecasted high temperature, but we'll talk about which areas have the greatest chance of seeing that, because your hour by hour temperatures definitely do not show a warm up like that. Only increasing maybe say about 7 degrees into the afternoon. 55 degrees, still going to be a pretty chilly atmosphere. That's mainly if you hold on to the fog, you hold on to the cloud cover that we currently have present. And then of course your numbers are going to continue to drop as we go into the evening time frame, but they are going to get cooler a little bit faster this evening. So I would plan on definitely having some layering ready if you have any outdoor plans, or maybe planning on going grilling out or just a dinner with friends and family, because we are going to get the clearing in this cloud cover throughout today, and that's going to allow for more of a dip in the temperatures as we go into tonight. Satellite and radar picture, we are rain-free, but we are not cloud-free whatsoever. Widespread cloud cover, but some gaps, maybe up here in northern Monroe County and to Jasper County. Some of our southwestern counties starting to see some gaps in that cloud cover. This does make sense because we saw a rain. It was very widespread, engulfed all of central Georgia early this morning, but it started to taper off from west to east. I imagine the cloud cover is going to do a very similar thing throughout today. But also, we see some spots of clearing down there in Telfair, Wheeler, and Montgomery counties. So maybe starting to see a little bit less cloud cover down the farther south that you live. And obviously areas down to the south are going to start to be maybe just a couple degrees warmer than the rest of the bunch this time of year. So it's looking like a much better radar image than what we did have present just merely a couple hours ago, back all the way into the early morning hours around 6 or 7 a.m. Some scattered showers down here in northern Florida, stretching into southeast Georgia, scattered sprinkles the closer and closer you get to the Savannah area. But most of the rain has moved on, and it's actually up near areas like Myrtle Beach, near Wilmington, North Carolina, and it continues to span up the eastern Carolina coast. So actually, this is a whole lot of rain that's spanning even farther than those areas. It goes all the way up to the mid-Atlantic portions of the country, up into areas like New York. But then as you transition into the New England area, take a look at the shift in colors. We start to see that fine line of pink right there, which is going to indicate your wintry mix. And then once you start to get the white and gray shades, this is going to indicate widespread snowfall up in areas like Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, going to New York, eastern Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, all the way down into portions of Connecticut and maybe even northern Rhode Island. But you can see that there's a good amount of discrepancy, maybe a mix of rain and snow in some areas like New Jersey, New York, getting up into Connecticut and Rhode Island. But this is a widespread weather system that is impacting the eastern part of the United States. It's pretty quiet over there back to the west. In fact, high pressure centered smack dab in the middle of the state of Texas. But all this weather is being caused by these closed lows that we have been talking about. So those Gulf lows that have formed along our boundary that passed through late on Sunday, and they are continuing to move up to the north and the northeast along this boundary and along the stationary boundary. We do have a lot of lift associated with that. So that's kind of your main axis of where rain showers continue to sprout up. Some heavier rainfall is going to be a little bit closer to the stationary boundary itself, but that continues to stretch up into the New England portion of the country and a big driver of the active weather early this Tuesday morning, and even some winter storm weather up into cooler portions of the country that haven't seen those numbers get above the 32-degree mark. So let's go visit Future View. What's in store for the rest of today? I did mention the steady clearing in cloud cover, and obviously the fog is kind of inhibiting that steady clearing that we should see. So that fog eventually will continue to lift up, and that's going to start to thin out the higher and higher it gets in the atmosphere, but it will still leave us with some gloomy skies until it finally starts to fall apart right before we get to sunset. So this is around 5 p.m. later on this evening. Some clearing farther to the north, still holding on to the cloud cover farther down to the south. But as we transition into the nighttime hours, we will get a brief moment in the clearing of cloud cover before more widespread clouds build in as we wake up tomorrow morning. Now, these are present farther over to the east. It may take a little bit longer for the sun to rise as we go, or getting an image of the sunrise, rather, I should say. The sun is still going to rise at the same time. But with cloud cover kind of blocking that image over to the east, depending on how far east it does stretch, we may get that first glimpse of sunlight as it peaks above the tree line, but then it's going to move back behind some clouds over to the east, and then it's going to be probably somewhere halfway through the day before we can actually get a good image of the sun. But however, it looks like we do have maybe even a few sprinkle chances that are enveloped within this cloud cover tomorrow. I wouldn't go buying too much stock into this. I don't think it's very likely that you see anything in the way of a sprinkle shower tomorrow, especially given the fact that our most populated areas like Macon, Warner Robins, and areas along I-75 in our southern counties, you're not seeing any cloud cover whatsoever. But we will have some partly cloudy skies throughout the afternoon on Wednesday before that eventually falls apart. And then we end Wednesday on a nice and clear note, but you will want to soak up the rest of Tuesday and most of Wednesday. Soak up that dry weather because we have some changes that are going to be fastly approaching as early as Thursday morning. Thursday morning looks like a pleasant start, nothing but sunshine over to the east, but we can see a whole lot of clouds and even some showers back over to the west and the northwest in the Birmingham area. But then as we go throughout the day on Thursday, the mostly sunny start transitions into a mostly cloudy afternoon already at the 1 p.m. hour, and within this cloud cover, a couple of spotty light showers are going to be present. I have your rain chance at about 20% as we go into Thursday afternoon. But really the bulk of the rain looks to arrive really early on Friday morning. So this is some very widespread rain encompassing much of northern Georgia, but eventually it will start to make its presence known throughout most of the day on Friday. Now this is as far as Future View goes out as of right now. We'll get a better idea about this as we go throughout the next 12 hours or so. So Ansley Parker will be in and having a better image about how Friday morning specifically looks. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you it's probably going to be a very similar start to what we had today. Maybe not as widespread of rain, but we will have a good amount of some widely scattered showers, mainly of the light variety, maybe some pockets of steady rain, and a mostly cloudy atmosphere. But the important thing with that is remember that it will be mostly cloudy on Friday, because that's going to increase your morning low temperatures just a tad. They're actually going to drop down and be mighty frigid as you walk out the door both tomorrow and Thursday mornings. So in terms of the winds, what time should you expect those widespread, maybe gusts up to 20, 25 miles per hour to build in? I do believe that's going to be later this afternoon, and it's going to be pretty short-lived because we go into the nighttime hours. Those colors of blue and yellow start to dissipate very quickly, and then we're not talking about really anything in the way of windy conditions throughout both Wednesday and Thursday. I think we'll start to get an uptick in the winds maybe as we go sometime into Friday, maybe even the later hours of Friday. But right now, the main focus is going to be the rain. So over the next 3 days, that's the icon I had earlier this morning. Just forgot to flip it over to the partly cloudy one. 62, we have the potential to climb up there for a high temperature, but in all likelihood, you're very likely going to be somewhere in the mid to upper 50s throughout the remainder of your Tuesday. Still a pretty chilly forecast, and your afternoon highs don't change much into Wednesday and into Thursday, but your morning low temperatures do, because it has been, believe it or not, even though it's been a very chilly atmosphere and the rain obviously made it probably feel a little bit cooler this morning, but 29 as we walk outside tomorrow and 33. So near freezing temperature or a couple degrees below freezing temperature as you walk outside both Wednesday and Thursday. You'll want to continue to keep that layering very handy. You can go ahead and toss the rain jacket aside until maybe we get into Thursday afternoon, but you are going to want to keep the hoodie, maybe the winter coat present, especially for that morning commute with numbers widespread in the 30s and maybe a few areas that dip down into the upper 20s like I have for tomorrow. So your morning low temperatures, the good news is 29 is the coolest that we get over the next couple of days. Remember, I was talking about we have cloud cover present as you walk out the door on Friday, maybe even some spotty light showers. Well, 40 degrees, that increase in cloud cover will lead to a bump up in your morning lows. Back a little bit closer to average, but your average low actually just went down to 39 degrees. So the upper 30s, believe it or not, are going to become more and more frequent as we go throughout this last month of the calendar year, and we still haven't even made it into the official start of winter. Hopefully those numbers don't get too much lower, but I imagine they'll get probably just above freezing temperature, and then they'll begin to trend back upwards as we head into the warmer portions of the calendar year sometime around February into next March. So 40 and 41 starting out Friday and Saturday, pretty similar. But the downside of that is if you keep the widespread cloud cover like we saw yesterday, only a 9-degree temperature difference between your morning low and your afternoon high. Well, your afternoon high on Friday, 51 degrees. So we are just going to hold on to that chill for each of the next 5 days. And once again, 62, that does look like it's on the warmer side of things. That's still going to be below average, and that's only going to be a select few areas. I do imagine many of you are just going to have high temperatures somewhere in the mid to upper 50s throughout the rest of the work week and into the beginning of the weekend. So let's talk about the humidity levels, because obviously we got a bit of an influx in it with these rain chances that did move in last night into early this morning. Well, it looks like they are going to take a dip back down. So the backside of this low pressure center is going to result in some drier air back in the forecast for Wednesday and Thursday. But we do see a bump up into Friday, and I do imagine it's going to be a bit more of a bump up than that. However, it is very quick to go back down, and it's not stopping as we go into the beginning of next week, indicating a very, very dry atmosphere as you walk outside on Sunday and Monday. So let's break down your long-range rain chances. Here's all that rain that we did get a glimpse of early on Friday morning, around 3 or 4 in the morning. As we transition a couple hours in the future, both models are agreeing widespread rain will be present across this northern Gulf, those southern Gulf Coast states, and starting to move into central Georgia. It does look like this is going to be maybe an all-day rain affair as we go throughout the day on Friday. So Friday morning into the afternoon and into the evening. Obviously not the best forecast for, say, I believe it is state semifinal playoff games. However, it is going to be a cold forecast along with that, so make sure that you're bundling up, and like I was saying all morning long, wearing that layering underneath the rain gear. Now we go into Friday night, and it does look like rain chances do begin to taper off. Only the European model is hinting that we will still have a good amount of rain here in the vicinity of central Georgia. But there are events that are happening on Saturday, specifically a lot of Christmas parades that are going to be happening, and we have a big playoff football game here in the Macon area. The Mercer Bears hosting South Dakota for the first round of those FCS playoffs. First time that Mercer football has hosted an FCS playoff game in quite some time, so obviously we want some suitable weather for it. Well, the good news is I do think that the main axis of rain on Saturday is going to be to the south of us. So how far north that rain stretches is still a question, and probably an answer that we probably won't get until we get into Thursday and we can actually get Saturday within view of our short range, our higher resolution models. But I do expect Saturday to have a lesser rain chance than what we are going to see on Friday. So that's already something that's very promising. But now with the newest model runs, it does look like we could see the return of maybe some more widespread rain. Again, this isn't directly over central Georgia. This main axis of rain is centered down in South Georgia and northern Florida. And this is going into Saturday night around 11 p.m., but we could have some showers that try to hang around into the second half of your weekend. And then right there is where all the model agreement, does end. The GFS still shows plenty of moisture left to work with as we wrap up on Sunday afternoon. I'm not putting too much stock into these rain chances. I do believe Sunday has the lesser rain chance of each day that we do have this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then as we go into Monday and Tuesday, maybe about a 10% chance of rain. We do see some spotty dots of green, some spotty dots of some blue, but we'll continue to fine tune that as we get closer. The big thing with this next rainmaker, it will be widespread once again. So take your rainfall totals that you've gotten so far. If you aren't satisfied with them, you think you need a little bit more rain to get you out of some of those drought conditions, well, good news. We do have some of that in store. Maybe some totals up to around 2 inches, just above the 1 inch mark. It's kind of looking like that same range that we were looking at as of yesterday, that 1 to 2 inch range in terms of rainfall all across central Georgia. But maybe some areas down to the south are only going to get a couple tenths of an inch of rain, only about 8 to 9 tenths of an inch of rain in areas like Eastman and Cordele. But this is far from certain. Don't get locked into these certain values, just more think of it in terms of the range, because that's what everyone does have the potential for. So now let's go into the European model. It does hint at maybe a couple sprinkles throughout the next 24 hours, nothing that's going to really impact your day whatsoever, and it's going to be very short-lived if you do see a sprinkle. But how about this? Southern counties that weren't necessarily popping up as high totals as areas farther to the north, according to the GFS, it looks like they're going to get maybe 2 inches of rain, maybe just slightly above 2 inches of rain, and some isolated pockets where we could see some totals up to 3 inches of rain. So it does look like another pretty significant rainmaker to add about 1 inch or 2 of rain to the totals we've already seen is going to be in store as we head into the beginning of the weekend. So obviously the rain, something that you definitely don't want to have in the forecast. However, it isn't always the worst thing in the world, especially given how dry we've been. And if you missed it yesterday, we did wrap up hurricane season on Sunday. So your final numbers stand at 13 named storms, 5 of which made hurricane status, and 4 of those 5 actually got up to Category 3 or higher status as major hurricanes. So in all, in the terms of the frequency of storms, we definitely didn't see what was forecasted for this season and didn't even reach our average marks. But in terms of those very intense hurricanes, we actually met what was forecasted and went 1 storm above average. Very thankfully, we didn't have any of those impact our forecast in central Georgia, and many of them did not make landfall with the exception of Hurricane Melissa pretty late in the hurricane season. So this year marks the first time in 10 years that the United States has had 0 landfalling hurricanes. Now, we did have 1 tropical storm make landfall. That was back around 4th of July. That was Tropical Storm Chantal, but obviously it didn't have as drastic of implications as, say, it would if it was a hurricane when it did make landfall. Still had some impacts in the form of some inland flooding up in northern North Carolina, closer to the Raleigh area, the Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill area. But we didn't see really any impacts here in central Georgia, maybe a couple of increased rain chances, but all in all, we will definitely take that and run with it. It is never a bad thing to have a less than active hurricane season, especially after what we did have in 2024 with Hurricane Helene. So your 7-day forecast continues to be highlighted by below average temperatures, some cool afternoons, some morning temperatures that are going to vary a little bit more, maybe say in the upper 20s tomorrow, near freezing on Thursday before we bump back up into the 40s. And it looks like your forecast doesn't change too much as we go into the beginning of next week, even with less rain chances in the forecast. But as your weekend forecast right now goes, Friday is the day that you need to plan on widespread rain being back in the forecast. Still trying to fine tune what time the rain chances are going to move out of here on Saturday. And I do have less and less confidence in the rain chances on Sunday and Monday as opposed to Friday and Saturday. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for a dry forecast, but make sure that you are continuing to wear that winter weather gear as we transition through the first week of December. Thanks for tuning in to your extended forecast. We're back here tomorrow at 11 a.m.